In this video, we're going to show you how to install intake manifold gaskets on your Jeep Grand Cherokee, located on the bottom side of your intake manifold. To remove our ground terminal here, we're going to use a 13mm on the nut side and a 13mm on the bolt head side. Go ahead and loosen that. Give that a wiggle, pull that off and set it aside. Do the same on this side here. We're going to use a 13mm, loosen. Our bolt is holding, but this happens to spin. We can hold it with our wrench. Give that a wiggle, pull this up and off. Now on your particular vehicle, down here on the side of the battery, there may be a wedge or a battery hold down block. You want to go ahead and loosen and remove that bolt and remove the block. Our particular vehicle does not have that. So at this point here, we're just going to go ahead and grab the battery, pull it up and set it aside. We're going to remove our upper intake unit here off of the throttle body as well as our air filter. We're going to use our flathead screwdriver and we're going to go ahead and start to loosen this clamp right here. Then we're going to come on over to the top of the airbox. I want to undo the retaining clips and reach underneath the little spring clip and lift up on these tabs. There should be a few of these. And lift up on this and wiggle that off. Underneath our intake here, you're going to find a 10mm bolt. We're going to use our extension and 1/4-inch ratchet. Loosen and remove that bolt. Now there's one here and there's one on the passenger side as well that we're going to get to next. On the back side, on the driver's side, there is this vacuum port. We're just going to pull that off. And then we're going to go to the back side. There is a hose clamp that secures the airbox here to the throttle body. I'm just going to loosen that up a bit. Now I'm going to grab this here and lift it up. On the side of our throttle body, we have a series of electrical connectors and vacuum tubes. All of this has to come off. So you come on over here, press down on this little clip here, and then wiggle this off. Do the same for the upper one here. There's another sensor down below here. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect that. Okay, to remove our vacuum hoses here. disconnect our 2 cables from the throttle body. I'm going to rotate this back, slide the cable up and out of that notch, and pull the barrel out just like that. This one here is actually just snapped onto a little stud here, so you're going to grab this little plastic component and pull it forward. And pop that stud right out of the little notch on there. Now on the bottom side of our left cable here, there is a little hole or a notch in this metal bracket, and there's a little plastic locking button that holds the cable in place. I'm going to use a small pick here, and I'm going to put it in that notch and push in gently. That's going to press on a little spring-loaded tab, and it's going to unlock, and then you can reach in, grab that cable, and you can slide that out of that notch you can see right here, and then we're going to slide the other one out beside it and disconnect those 2 like so. On the front side of the engine, we want to go ahead and remove our drive belt or serpentine belt. We're down here on our tensioner. We're using a 15mm socket on that pulley. We want to go ahead and pull on this here. Get some slack on that belt. Drop that belt off, and then we'll go ahead and relax that. On the top of our air compressor right here, I want to go ahead and disconnect our electrical connector. So there's a red safety lock tab. I'm going to push that over. I want to try and push this little lock tab over to unlock it. And it's pretty much unlocked when the entire red tab is gone from this side here. And then we can go ahead and push down on this upper tab and separate that. Now I want to go ahead and unbolt the air compressor itself. We're going to go right to this 15mm bolt down here on the passenger side front. Use our 3/8 ratchet. I'm going to loosen and remove this bolt. Now on the other side here, there's a bolt down right here, 15mm. We're going to use our stubby extension, get on in there, loosen and remove this one. This AC line here has a little plastic bracket supported off one of the studs down below. You're just going to push that off to the side. On the back passenger side of the AC compressor, you're going to find a 13mm bolt here. Loosen and remove that. Now what we want to do is loosen our compressor. We're going to wiggle it back and forth using a pry bar to separate that. Lift it up and swing it out. Now we sprayed some rust penetrant down on there to try and break up that little bit of aluminum corrosion. And we got this up and out. So we're just going to swing this off to the side. And on our map sensor here, there's going to be a red lock tab. I'm going to go ahead and lift up on this. And then we're going to press in on the little tab behind it and pull the connector off. Now we're going to move this connector off of our coolant temp sensor right here. Going to press in on the little tab on the top. And go ahead and wiggle that off. And just fold that harness off to the side. The cable going to our alternator is on our fuel rail, just a little metal clip. I'm just going to go ahead and slide this off of our fuel rail. That'll allow us to pull that off to the side a little bit. Using an 11/16 socket, go ahead and remove this nut here. This nut is securing a ground strap as well as a wiring harness. We want to go ahead and swing that stuff out of the way. Pull that ground strap off and that harness. I'm just going to throw that nut back on there for now, just to place that. On the passenger side of the intake manifold, you're going to find your oil dipstick tube here. It comes back to a bracket and goes to the intake. Use your 10mm socket and ratchet. You can use a gear wrench too if you want. You want to go ahead, loosen and remove this nut, separating the dipstick tube from the intake. Now along the top here, we have 4 ignition coils on the passenger side, 4 on the driver's side. We want to disconnect all of the electrical connectors going to these here. You're going to press down on the tab on the top and go ahead and work that off. Sometimes they're stuck, so you end up using a pair of pliers. You don't want to crack the plastic, so gently do this if you're using pliers. Okay, we have these all disconnected now. We have a connector right here. We also want to go ahead and separate as well. So press down on that tab, do the same here. Just going to repeat that process for the driver's side here. Okay, we have all of our ignition coil harness separated now. And we'll grab this sensor right here and do the same here. Along the passenger side of the engine here, we're going to find this wiring harness that runs across the top of our valve cover, but just to the right of our fuel line here. We're going to grab the harness and we're going to gently pull up on this here, and this is going to pull up off of the plastic guides or sleeves that hold the harness down in place here. This should allow us to pull back on this harness a little bit. Now pulling back on this harness, there are some wires that come out of this harness that go to our fuel injector, so you don't want to pull too hard on it, but enough to get this up and away so we can get to our fuel injector connections. Now the next thing before we get to those fuel injector connections, on this fuel rail over here, there is a little black screw cap. Now we're going to unscrew this here. And what this is, this gives us access to a Schrader valve for our fuel pressure and our fuel rail. And once you remove this cap here, you want to go ahead and set that aside. Now the next step is put safety glasses on. Super important. What we're going to do is we're going to tuck some towels down underneath here, underneath our fuel rail. And in the center of this valve is going to be a little pin. This is a fuel pressure release here, or this is where you can test your fuel pressure. Now our vehicle has not been running in a little bit, so there probably is no pressure, but what you want to do is press in on this little spring-loaded pin right in the center. If you have fuel pressure, it is going to spray out of there. Safety glasses, make sure you have a towel to go ahead and kind of shield. Press that in, let that fuel pressure come out until there's no pressure left. Once that fuel pressure is released, you can now go ahead and pull your towels out. Each side of our engine is going to have a fuel rail. They're connected by this fuel rail running across the front over to the driver's side. We're on our passenger side right now. Follow the fuel rail down. You're going to find 4 fuel injectors, one here, and then 2 in the back over there. Now the electrode connectors going to it have a red safety lock clip on there. Okay. What you can do is use a screwdriver or a small pick. You can use your finger if you want, but ours are a little stuck. Push up on that safety clip and they'll stop. Then you want to press in on this little spring tab here and pull that harness off. You want to go ahead and repeat this process for the other 7. Right in the middle over here, just above the valve cover, you're going to find this plastic bracket that goes underneath your 2 AC lines. Now there's 2 U-shaped supports on there that hold the AC line. You can grab the AC lines and literally just pop them right out of it. And when you use a tool here to go ahead and pull this up and off, this is the component that we just removed, and it just slides down over one of the valve cover studs here. This is going to give us a little more room to go ahead and pull our wiring harness over to get to the back 2 injectors. Now that we have all 4 of the injectors removed on this side here, we can go ahead and pull that harness up. We'll go ahead and repeat this process for the other side. On the driver's side fuel rail here, you have the main fuel inlet right here, or input. Now there is a metal retaining lock right here. I want to go ahead and pop this out. That swings down and then unhooks these 2 teeth from the unit. Slide that up out of the way. Now you're going to need a specific tool. You can use a metal version, or the plastic version of this here, but these here are a fuel pressure lock release tool, and they come in different sizes depending on your vehicle. You want to use eye protection, safety glasses when you're doing this here, and there's probably going to be some leftover residual fuel in this line. Our vehicle has not been running in a little while now, so there's probably not a lot, if any, in here. But if your vehicle was running recently, you will have fuel in here and it will leak out. We do have some residual fuel leaking out there. In order for this tool to work, what you do is you push this collar or sleeve up inside, and it releases the internal lock on this here. Go ahead and pop off that tool, set that aside. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a cap here. I'm going to push that on. This will protect anything from getting inside there. And I'm just going to wrap up this end here in my towel and pull this off to the side. Our next step is to remove our ignition coils. Now there are 10mm nuts holding our coils in place. Once we pull the coils, that is now going to drop or expose deep holes going down to our spark plugs. What we want to do next before we remove these is, if you have the ability to do so, use your blowgun with your compressor and blow off the top of the motor. Get rid of any debris, dirt, sand, anything like that off of this. You want this to be as clean as possible. Not only when we remove this here, but before we remove the intake. You can use a rag on your throttle body, or I'll just use an old glove. Just put that on there. That'll protect anything from blowing inside of this. You want to keep this clean as well. I'm going to use our 10mm socket and remove the nuts on the top of our ignition coils. You want to be careful with these here, not to drop them down. It'll be tough to get to them before you remove the intake. Continue this process for all 8 of these units here. You know, on both sides, you're also going to have this sensor here. There's one on the driver's side, one on the passenger side. Now that we removed our last nut off of our ignition coils, we can now go ahead and start to remove our ignition coils themselves. Now I'm going to give these a little twist and pull up. And there you go, you're separating the rubber boot from the spark plug inside and pulling that up and out. We want to continue this process for the other 7. Now, in order for us to pull out the back coils over here, we have to loosen our PCV hose right here. Now, the hose that goes in right over here, I want to go ahead and grab this hose. You might have to use some hose pliers to go ahead and slide this off of our PCV. It's going to allow us to move this around. You're going to have to push on the transmission dipstick tube, push it up and over at an angle to get that to come up and out. You have to work at it a little bit. This one here is complicated to get out, but once you push that transmission tube up and pull this out at the same time, you'll be able to get that out. Just apply light pressure with a small pry bar. I'll help you get these out if they're stuck. Now on the back of our alternator here, we have our power wire going. You want to pinch these tabs, pull off that little cover. We're going to remove this nut here using our 13mm socket. On the back side, we have an electrical connector right here. There's a little pinch tab on the top. You want to pinch that, give that a little wiggle, pop that out, pull our cable off, and set that off to the side. I'm going to go ahead and throw that nut back on our alternator for now. Now we're going to go ahead and take our wire harness, and we're just going to tuck this over to the side. Let's go ahead and tackle removing the alternator here. We're just going to pull that belt off. It's just been sitting there. Using our 15mm. I'll go ahead and break the two 15s loose here. I'll go ahead and loosen and remove those. And then there's one more 13mm bolt just above the drawer side valve cover here. We're going to loosen and remove that one next. Now I want to go ahead and remove this from the bracket. I'm just going to use a pry bar, give that a twist. Then we're just going to rock this back and forth until it slides off the center bracket there. And then go ahead and set that aside. On the back side of the throttle body, we have our throttle cable bracket right here. Now it's going to be two more 8mm screws. There's one here, and there's one behind the bracket securing this to the intake. We're going to go ahead and put our wrench on this here. There's not a lot of room to get a ratchet on that because of the firewall on the back side. On the back side, we have our 1/4-inch ratchet with our 8mm socket. And grab that bolt, pull that out. I should be able to go ahead and pull up our bracket here and remove this. Now our fuel rails are held in place by 4 8mm bolts. There's going to be two here, one on the back side over here, and then two on the passenger side in the same exact location. I'm going to go ahead and loosen and remove these. All right, let's go ahead and repeat for the passenger side. Now with our fuel rail unbolted, we now want to go ahead and remove our injectors with the rail. That's going to be the best option for us here. I'm going to go ahead and spray some solvent down at the base here. Go ahead and wiggle these here. Okay, we have all 4 injectors out with the O-rings on the driver's side. We're going to repeat this process for the passenger side. Go ahead and grab the fuel rail with your injectors and work this whole system out and set this aside. All right, we're going to go ahead and remove our bolts securing our intake to the engine. Now there are 10 bolts, and the way we have to remove these bolts are the same order that they have to be when we torque them down on the installation. It's very, very important of this process. I'm going to write on the intake manifold the process, the numbers, in order that we're going to be doing this, so you can go ahead and follow this on our installation as well. We're going to follow this bolt here, 1, 2, 3. This will be number 1. Directly across the third bolt back will be number 2. Number 3 is going to be the bolt right behind here. Then the one directly across the fourth bolt back here will be number 4. Number 5 is going to be the second bolt back here. Number 6 right here. Number 7 is the back passenger side. That is the furthest bolt back. Number 8 is the back driver's side. Number 9 is this one right here. And number 10 is this one right here. And these are 10 millimeter. For this rearward bolt here, we're going to use our 1/4-inch hand ratchet to get in there due to clearance. Now I went ahead and I grabbed a piece of cardboard here and I marked what bolt goes where. That way there I can go ahead and just pull these out and place them where they're supposed to go. I don't like to try and pull the intake while these are bouncing around because then they fall out and you're not sure what bolt goes where. Some of them might be different, some might be longer, some shorter, and you never know. So this is just a good practice to get into when you're doing this kind of job. And once you're done with this here, go ahead and set that on a bench. Now the very last component that we need to remove here is our coolant temp sensor. Now you might lose a little bit of coolant from this here. You have a couple options. One, drain a little bit of coolant from the radiator until it's below this level, or you can just put some towels and rags around here, open this up, and let this purge out a little bit. We're gonna opt for this option here. Gonna put some towels around here. We're gonna use a 3/4 inch socket, deep socket, loosen and remove our coolant temp sensor. And our coolant level appears to be a little bit low, so we're not losing any coolant. But once your coolant does continue or finish draining out there, go ahead and remove the towels, set that coolant temp sensor aside. I'm going to remove our cowl seal here. Just flop that up top. That's going to give us a little more clearance right here. We have our PVC plastic tube here that goes back to a flex hose on the back side of the intake. And reach around the back side of the intake, you can grab that PVC hose and pop that right off. That's going to loosen that up there. I'm going to continue to go ahead and work this out. Now we went ahead and ran a vacuum on our intake here, cleaned up that big mess down here. Next thing we're going to do is grab some towels or some rags, tuck it down inside the intake ports. We don't want to have anything drop down inside here. Interior towels, make them a little bit smaller and easier to fit in there. And do this for all 8. Our next step is to clean our intake runners here. Spray some solvent on a towel and we're going to start cleaning this here. We want to make sure that our surface is free of any imperfections or buildup of any oil or anything like that on here. I'm going to continue this process for all of the cylinder ports here. Now on the bottom side of our intake here, you're going to have a gasket on each port. You can use a small pick here. We're going to just catch the edge of that gasket and go ahead and peel that out. We're going to continue for the other 7 ports. Now we're also going to go ahead and use some spray solvent, spray it onto a towel or rag, and we want to wipe down our surface here. Make sure that this is clean. Then you're going to take a new gasket. Go ahead and line that up and simply press that in. Get that fully seated. Now it should protrude just a little bit beyond the manifold itself. Let's go ahead and do the other 7. Now in most cases, a new intake manifold will come with these gaskets already installed. All you want to do is inspect them, make sure they are fully seated and they're not partially hanging out. All right, one whole side done. Repeat for the other 4. Now with our base intake portion clean, we can go ahead and remove our towels. Just blow off any debris that might be just resting on the top. Now, if you're installing a brand new intake manifold, you're going to want to go ahead and swap over these small sensors that are located on the intake as well as a throttle body. You're going to do that using a 10mm socket for the throttle body and T20 Torx bits for the other components. Now we need to go ahead and feed our intake down and in. Now as we're doing this here, we are going to run into a little bit of obstruction here on the front side of the engine. And we want to make sure that this intake goes in and make sure that our intake gaskets don't come off of the intake itself. Now that we have our intake set on top of the engine, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to reach around the backside and install the PCV hose on the backside of that intake. I'm going to hold the intake and wiggle that PCV hose onto the backside. You can feel that it's completely seated. Now we're going to install our coolant temp sensor right here, and we rewrapped the threads with some thread tape sealant on there. That'll help prevent any leaks from coming through. Let's go ahead and get that started, and then we'll go ahead and snug that down into place. Gonna thread that down till it gets pretty snug. You don't want to over tighten it. But we did remove our connector earlier, that the tab was facing pretty much towards the passenger side of that engine. So we know that we're in our correct position there. Now we have our cardboard cut out here for our bolts. We're gonna go ahead and install these. Just going to get them started a few threads. Now for our two back bolts here, we have a ground strap that runs from one bolt to the other on the back side. So I want to make sure that when we install this here that this strap is attached. So we're going to run our ground strap from our driver's side. We'll get that installed, and then we'll go ahead and install that back passenger bolt. All right, we have the driver's side rear bolt installed. Let's go ahead and install the back passenger bolt with that ground strap. Now what we're going to do is get all of our bolts at least snugged down gently. We do not want to over tighten these because there is a certain torque specification as well as the pattern. So I'm stopping pretty much when that bolt hits the plastic. So I'm going to hold the ground strap when I go to tighten the bolt here. Because you don't want that ground strap to twist and snap off on you or bind up. Our next step is to torque the intake manifold. And we're going to torque it in the same way that we had removed them. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. These are going to get torqued to 8.75 foot-pounds or 105 inch-pounds. Let's go ahead and start. Let's go ahead and install our upper cowl seal that we had popped off. There's just a little track here that presses onto the top right here. Let's install our throttle cable bracket. That goes underneath our oil dipstick tube bracket. Line that up. Let's go ahead and get the bolts started up here. I'm going to thread these down as far as I can by hand. And we use our 8mm wrench. And we just want to gently snug down the bolt here. This is going into plastic, so you don't want to over tighten it. Once that bolt bottoms out, just give it a little bit more. I want to go ahead and do the same to the bottom. All right. Now that we have that back bolt snug, Want to come on over to our stud right here where the bracket comes down. Go ahead and press down our oil dipstick tube here and get that nut installed. Install our cable here. So that slides in to the bracket itself. I'm going to push that all the way in. This slides over and you're going to lock it onto the little pin right here. So just line that up, push it on. You're going to feel it in here, it snap into place. Then we have our barrel end cable. Now this is the one that has the lock on it. So there's a little button on the bottom side of it that is going to lock into the button right here. So make sure you position that horizontally, line that up. Push it in and you're going to hear it and feel that snap in. Now the barrel end itself, you want to go ahead and rotate this here. Slide the barrel end in. Lock it in and then release. And these two cables are installed. Let's connect all of our components onto our throttle body. We have our brake booster vacuum hose that goes onto the bottom rear. We have the upper vacuum hose here. Then we'll install our electrical connectors. Here we go. Let's go ahead and feed in our injector rail here. Now what I like to do before pressing these into place, I'm going to spray the bottoms of the injector O-rings with some solvent and push those in. Do the same for the other side. Install your fuel rail bolts. I'm going to go ahead and snug those down. Once those bottom out and snug, that's pretty much good for those there. We're going to install our ignition coils. We're going to put a little bit of grease on the O-ring, a little bit inside. I'm going to smear this grease around the O-ring. Let's go ahead and work that down inside. I'm going to repeat that process for the other coils. And we have our sensors here. It's going to install that on our second coil back. And now let's go ahead and install the nuts. Let's go ahead and snug down our coil nuts here. Now these are sleeved with a metal sleeve inside. You just want to snug them, don't over tighten them, but once that nut bottoms out, just give it a little bit more and you're all set. Just continue for the other coils here. Might be easier to pop off some of these connectors here or something to get to those nuts. I'm just going to pop off that vacuum hose on the back side here. Install that vacuum hose again on the back and reconnect that connector here. Let's tighten down the nuts on the passenger side. On the passenger side rear nut, you probably want to use a swivel head ratchet with an extension or something, maybe a swivel extension. Get to that back nut, go ahead and snug that down. Now on your fuel line here, you want to go ahead and install this onto the fuel rail. So pop off the cap that we have here. Our fuel line cap had split on us. We're just going to go ahead and cut that off, remove the rest of that. Go ahead and put our fuel line on, line that up, push it on. And you're gonna hear it and feel it snap into place. Now the next key thing you wanna do is take your lock here. You wanna make sure you can get the hooks on the inside and then fold this over. Like so, and that'll lock that into place. Install your alternator. At this point here, we're just going to continue to work our alternator down so we can get all three of these bolts installed, and then we'll go ahead and tighten those down. Using your 15mm socket, let's go ahead and snug down the two horizontal bolts on the alternator. Just gently snug that. I'm going to torque our two front bolts to 19 foot-pounds. And torque our third bolt up here to 12 foot-pounds. Install your fuel Schrader valve cap. Thread that on. And just above the fuel rail in the Schrader is going to be this stud here. We're going to install our ground. Put that on. Actually have our wire harness bracket here as well. I'll get that installed. So you should have the ground strap and the harness bracket. Now just before that nut bottoms out, you want to go ahead and hold that ground strap on the back side. You don't want that to grab and twist. However, it is underneath the bracket for the harness, so it shouldn't twist on you. You want to go ahead and snug that down. Once that bottoms out, just get a little bit more. It doesn't have to be super tight. You're just securing the harness and that ground there. You can install the hose on our PCV. Just line that up and go ahead and push that on. Install the alternator harness. Bring your positive side cable over. There is a tab that lines up on the front side of the stud. Get that nut started on there. Once that nut bottoms out, give it a little bit more. It doesn't have to be super tight, but you do want to lock that in. That tab will assist you in securing that properly. Then you can take your cap here, line this up, press it on. That'll cover that. You have the electrical connector for the back side. Line that up, push it on. You're gonna feel it and hear it snap into place. Give it a little wiggle, make sure that isn't coming off. Then you have the harness clip here. We'll line this up. And just snap that on like so. Bring your harness over. And want to go ahead and put the connector onto your map sensor here. Line that up, push that down, snap that on, and then press that red lock tab on. Then we have our coolant temp sensor harness down below. Go ahead and line that up. Push that down, you're going to hear that lock into place. This last connector is for your AC compressor. So we're just going to reroute this a little bit. Here we go. I'm going to leave that hanging for now. You want to install the wire harness onto your ignition coils and your fuel injectors. Push it on, you're going to hear them click in, and then push your red lock tabs down into place. And then take your ignition coil wire, line that up and push that on. You're going to hear those click in. I'm going to continue that process all the way down. As we also go down here, we have the sensor right here. Install the harness onto that. Go ahead and line up the AC compressor. Swing that around into place. I'm going to take our longer bolt here. I'm going to slide this through the front. We're just going to use our mallet here or dead blow hammer to go ahead and tap this down so we can get that bolt hole to line up. And feed that in. And we'll get that bolt started here. Take the thicker bolt, I'm going to line that up over here and just tap this, get that to line up, get that started, and then we'll take the longer, thinner bolt and get that started on the back side. Let's go ahead and snug down our 15mm bolts. And then we'll snug down our 13mm bolt on the back side. I'm going to come back with a ratchet. Just want to make sure that these are good and snug. I'm going to feed our AC compressor wire down underneath the power wire on the alternator. Bring that underneath the AC line and then onto the connector. Push that on. You're going to feel it and hear it snap in, and then press the lock to engage that. Then we're going to spin up our bracket for the AC line and snap that on. Now that we have our belt set up ready to go, we're going to use our 15mm socket. Let's go ahead and move that tensioner and get that belt put on. Now when you're releasing the tension on the belt, you want to inspect, make sure that the belt is completely on all of the pulleys and all of the ribs are lined up. Let's go ahead and install all of our fuel injector and ignition coil harnesses. Then we have our other sensor right here. Going to install that. Our harness has these plastic retainers that push down onto the valve cover studs, and we'll kind of get those lined up. Install our upper airbox. We're going to remove our glove there. Now installing this here, you have the two installation rubber grommets here, as well as the hose clamp on the back side. We're going to line that up onto the throttle body. Push that in. And as that lines up, go ahead and get our bolts installed. Once you get that bolt started there, repeat for the other side. And once you have those started, you want to go ahead and just gently snug those down. Install your vacuum hose here. And then on the back side, use your flathead screwdriver and tighten down that hose clamp. Want to make sure that's good and snug. When I install our airbox lid here, you want to make sure that the four locking clips are flipped outward. Line this up. We're going to feed the intake tube here onto the box, the upper portion here. Go ahead and press our lid down and on and put our locks on. I'm going to make sure that this is fully seated, and then secure the hose clamp. Make sure that's snug. Go ahead and install your battery. I'm going to use our 13mm socket and tighten this down. Use a 13mm wrench to hold the head side of the battery bolt. And let's go ahead and snug this down. Now, if your vehicle has a battery hold-down wedge or block, you want to go ahead and install that. Our particular vehicle does not have one installed. I'm going to snug that gently, and you're all set.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.